In today's show, we take a look at the latest mock drafts to see who the prognosticators have the Blazers taking at number 11, plus lessons that the Trailblazers can learn from the conference finalists. Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, world? It's your past first point guard, Trailblazers reporter Mike Richmond. You listen to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making this show your first listen, coming at you each and every weekday, Monday through Friday. So make it a part of your daily routine, make it your first listen, and tell your friends to do the same. It's Locked On Blazers, your team every day. In today's program, we're going to run through some recent mock drafts from some of my favorite prognosticators from across the internet, and then we will talk a little bit about the sort of predictive powers of ESPN over the last few seasons in the Cronin-Schmitz era in Portland, and why maybe paying close attention to the ESPN mock is worth your time, particularly as we get inch up closer to the draft, say in the next couple weeks. And then I want to talk lessons from the conference finals. There are 4 teams remaining in the NBA playoffs, and I think each of them has risen to where they are through a slightly different path. There are some commonalities, but each took a unique route to get there. And to be quite frank, as little as 3 or 4 seasons ago, all these teams were bad. And for where the Blazers are, I think that gives you a little bit of hope on how they get from where they have been recently to where they'd like to go, which is, playing games at the end of May, if not into stinking June. But let's get into the latest mock drafts. I'm only bringing you ones that have posted post-lottery or that I haven't shared with you since the lottery. I'm pretty specific about which ones I share with you. I'm not just going to throw out names from anybody who posts a mock draft on the internet. Folks who do this professionally, who've been doing it a long time, who I respect, I kind of I pick and choose here. My job is to aggregate. I take a lot of pride in doing quality aggregation. But that includes Hoop Intellect, former guest on the program, a wonderful YouTube channel where Keandre is as good as they get at breaking down in very straightforward and succinct ways prospects' strengths, weaknesses, their potential fits and places, and Hoop Intellect has the Blazers taking Noah Asenge. Asenge is super young. He's going to be one of the youngest players in the draft, if not the youngest player, and very likely to be the youngest player drafted in the lottery. He's a lanky forward who's playing professionally for Ratiofarm Ulm in Germany. He can hoop. He isn't good at a lot of things on offense, and yet he's still productive. Which is a classic sign of being able to hoop, where your skills haven't quite caught up with your other, your sort of on-court opportunities, but you still are productive despite not refined skills. And Asenge has that. Like he's lanky and he's a skinny forward, right? Like he's like, oh, you're maybe like a power forward-y build, but you weigh as much as a shooting guard. Like, what position do you play? And his, off the dribble game still needs a lot of work. His shooting is still a huge question mark. Like even how he's going to score on offense is probably it's like a bit puzzling in the league, but he's been productive in a relatively competitive league, fairly competitive league, I should say. Without those skills, he's got good defensive instincts. He's super young, and he's a pretty fluid athlete for his size and length. He may have grown since his last measurements were officially taken, but at the Basketball Without Borders camp last April, he measured 6'9" with a 6'11" wingspan and a 9-foot 3-inch standing reach, and had a max vert, which is like the vertical jump where you can run, of 35.5 inches. Like he's just so athletic. I think the concern would be that he's a project, right? And that projects don't always pan out. And there's just so much to go from being 18 to 24 and, sort of the level of patience the Blazers might want to have and the space they have for playing, and all those things. I think there's a lot of reasons to be a little bit, lower on Asenge just because of that. I'm intrigued by him as a physical just the physicality, right? The size, the fluidity at his size as a mover, the athleticism, the frame to be like just a really good defensive player, like a really, really good defensive player, because long arms and foot speed and jumping ability. I think that's really intriguing. The other stuff might not get there, but again, the productivity without the skill refinement makes you think it could get there, but I can understand some of the reservations you might have. He's intriguing for me. He seems like a Blazers-y pick, right? Like a toolsy, non-shooting wing that you hope you can like, okay, this fits their defensive. I'm speaking from their perspective, but that fits their preference for sort of like long, rangy defenders. They're one of the biggest teams in the league. Certainly, they've prioritized length, particularly on the wings. And they say like, okay, we've drafted a lot of guys that can't shoot. Hopefully, we can, we'll get them in the system and turn them into shooters. And maybe Asenge is the next sort of project for that. I don't think he'd be at my top pick at 11, but I do think he is a name to know and worth considering. Jonathan Wasserman over at Bleacher Report. Was has probably been covering the NBA draft for 15 years. He's been on it. He's got the Blazers taking Kasparas Giacochonis, the big guard from Illinois. I kind of flip-flop all the time on Giacochonis. I like the idea of him because he's my type of player. I love a big guard who can pass. Big guard playmakers is like a prototype I like. That's like a type of player that I'm into. I'm a little worried about what position he plays in the league, but I'd be willing, so sometimes I'm like, he's like, is he fast enough to guard in the league? Can he get into the paint? Can he be an efficient offensive player? Blah, blah, blah. And then sometimes I'm like, big creative wing passers is like so valuable. You can never have enough dudes who can pass and make plays off the bounce for their teammates. This is a skill set that travels. Go for it. I'm back and forth on him. I think it's kind of that one's a tough one for me to totally get behind one way or another. And then the last one today, you're listening to Tuesday, May 20th show, and on May 19th, ESPN released the latest mock. And in the latest mock, they have the Blazers at 11 taking Yegor Demin from the point guard or like big creator is maybe big guard from BYU. And when I say big, I mean it. At the draft combine, he measured 6'8.25" barefoot, with a 6'10" wingspan and an 8'9.5" standing reach, just shy of 200 pounds. Like a true 6'8", if he's that tall, like in shoes, he plays 6'9", like 6'8.25" with sneakers on. He's listed at 6'9". He's a true 6'9", like he's big. Early in the season, Yegor was the dude, right? Like the first 2 weeks of the college basketball season, he was crushing lesser competition with crazy pick and roll reads, right? He was coming down and reading the low man, helping and just whipping a pass to the corner, a jump pass with two hands, a no look pass to the strong side corner after he pulled the guy in, or like a off the dribble to the weak side corner. Like he was just so creative, so fun, so special with the playmaking early in his collegiate career. And it just slowed down a little bit for him. He just played better competition and he wasn't quite as good. And I think that is the challenge for him. But even as he struggled against, better competition down the second half of the season, he played two pretty good games in the NCAA tournament, which is certainly the most recent games I remember watching him, and he was pretty good in those games. Again, he's in the Giacochonis category. He's just even bigger. So it's like sometimes I can talk myself into him. Big creative passers. That's like that's a type of player I'm into. As just we all have our biases. That's one of mine. I worry a little bit about the shooting. Like if he can't shoot and he's not. It's hard to be a really good playmaker with no individual offense. Can he get himself to the rim and be that good there? And can he end up being a shooter and all those things? If he figures out how to get a little bit of individual offense, I think he's creative enough to be that guy. I feel like when I watched him, I didn't see him a ton, but like some of the knocks that I've seen on watching some scouting videos on YouTube, including my main man, Hoop Intellect, who recently put out, Keandre recently put out a scouting report on Demon, is like, just sometimes he's not aggressive enough. And I think that is, for playmakers, it's like you got to keep your foot on the gas because that allows you to make plays. Looking for your own offense allows you to make plays. he's intriguing, and there is something to the fact that on May 19th, ESPN's mock draft has him going there. That's not going to like sway me on him as a prospect, because I think mock drafts do different things. Some folks mock drafts try to say, here's what I would do if I was every team. These are the players I like at every spot, and if I was this team, this is how I would draft it. And some plugged in people who are good scouts, the way they put together their mocks is not necessarily based on intel, but based on, their scouting prowess. This is the best player for the Charlotte Hornets to take at 4. ESPN tends to do the reverse. Or not the reverse, the inverse of that. They tend to say, this is who this team is going to take. Their reporting is much more closer to trying to mock how it will go as opposed to how they think it should go. They talk, for the most part, what ESPN is bringing you is intel on how that's going to shake out. That's what Jonathan Givony does well. It's what Jeremy Woo does well now under the ESPN umbrella. And it has particularly been true for the Trailblazers as their prognostication powers have been pretty strong. Join me in the second segment. Let's talk about that, because I think paying attention to the ESPN mocks around this time has given us a little bit to chew on. Join me in the second segment. We'll talk all about it. First, though, let me tell you about CarGurus. Listen, if you are purchasing a car or attempting to purchase for a car, shopping for one, in fact, it should be exciting, not exhausting. But between confusing prices and hidden fees, it can feel really overwhelming. That's why you're going to love Car Guys. They help you cut through the noise and show you the best deals with full confidence. With over 4 million listings, CarGurus has more new and used cars than any other major online marketplace in the U.S. They verify dealers, provide real price analysis, and give you the tools and data you need to make the right choice without second-guessing yourself. In fact, in my home currently, we are in the market for a new car, and I have been using CarGurus to kind of be a jumping-off point to figure out what is out there and available. What I like about CarGurus is when you're searching for a car, obviously you can search make, model, year, price, all those things that you would want to when you're searching for a car, but they'll give you quickly as you're browsing to say, this is a good deal, this is a fair deal, this is a bad deal, this is an overpriced listing. So like you can quickly look through based on what your preferences are, and CarGurus will give you a quick read on what's a good deal in your area, what isn't, maybe what you should pursue and follow up on. It is just a wonderful spot to start your search and kind of relieve a lot of the hassle and the clutter that can come with searching for a car. It's no wonder SimilarWeb estimated traffic data shows CarGurus is the number 1 most visited car shopping site. Buy or sell your next car today with CarGurus at CarGurus.com. Go to CarGurus.com to make sure your big deal is the best deal. That's CarGurus.com. CarGurus.com. All right. So I want to take you in the Wayback Machine. In 2022, Joe Cronin hired an assistant GM named Mike Schmitz. Mike Schmitz has spent about a decade at ESPN, and prior to working for ESPN, he had worked with Jonathan Givony at Draft Express when they were just an independent shop, churning out really wonderful draft content, and Schmitz was turning out a bunch of public-facing draft content. Blazer fans know that. They enjoy the Mike Schmitz public-facing draft content. It allows you to at least know, I guess we're getting to the very end of the folks that he was publicly scouting in the cycle, but, know what his opinions were at some points. I will say, for the most part, they're positive opinions. Occasionally, you get some that are haterific, but for the most part, it is positive views. But when Schmitz joined the Blazers front office, it's not like him and Jonathan Givony lost each other's phone numbers. They know some stuff. And moreover, ESPN gets this stuff right. By the time we get a week out from the draft, ESPN will probably get 9 of the first 10 picks right, 12 of the 14 lottery picks right. They get intel from everybody. And that's one of the reasons they can get intel, because when you know what other teams are going to do, you can trade that intel for, if you know what someone at 4 is going to do, you can kind of trade that intel. That's like the marketplace of insider knowledge for what a team at 7 is going to do. And then blah, blah, and then on down the line and then back up the line as it happens. That's kind of how the news brokers, as the term I use, typically works. But for the Blazers, ESPN's mocks have been pretty spot on, and they've been pretty spot on right around in this range where we sit in now. So joining back in 2022, Mike Schmitz has joined the team. He's joined the front office. He was going to join after the draft, but he ends up joining sort of during the draft process because like talking about prospects on ESPN while weeks away from joining an NBA team really was a weird thing to try to navigate. So he ended up just leaving ESPN a little bit early and joining the Blazers front office. On May 17th, ESPN posted a mock draft right after the lottery where the Blazers were taking Jalen Duren at 7. That's not what happened. But on May 31st, 2022, following the NBA's draft combine in Chicago, ESPN had the Blazers taking Shaedon Sharpe at 7 from May 31st on. The draft happened more than 3 weeks later. They never changed from Shaedon Sharpe, and the Blazers drafted Shaedon Sharpe. They had it a month early. In 2023, the post-lottery draft had the Blazers taking Scoot Henderson at 3 and James Nagy at 23. This was, at the time, somewhat surprising because most folks had Brandon Miller as the third best prospect and Scoot at 2. It became much clearer as we got further down the line, despite some best efforts from Shams Charania and his betting partnership, that Brandon Miller was always the guy for Charlotte. But on May 16th, they had ESPN had Scoot pegs in 2023. On June 6th, when they released their another mock post-combine, this is actually their second one post-combine, but they still had Scoot, and but on June 6th, they had Scoot at 3 and Chris Murray at 23. Picking Scoot at 3, sure, that's a pretty good guess, but you kind of knew who the top 3 picks. Nailing 23, nailing that far down the draft with Chris Murray, that's intel you can trust. And that's why I say pay attention to ESPN stuff. In 2024, the post-lottery mock from ESPN had the Blazers taking Nikola Topic at 7 and Tijan Salah at 14. The post-combine lottery had the Blazers taking, this one, and May 22nd, had the Blazers taking Nikola Topic at 6 and Zach Edey at 14. Charlotte was taking Klingon in this mock draft. And then on May 31st, 9 days later, the mocks were updated, and the Blazers were taking Donovan Klingon at 7 and Cody Williams at 14. At this point, on May 31st of last season, ESPN had the top 3 100% correct in the right order, and 4 of the top 7 spots nailed more than 3 weeks before the draft. Pay attention. They have right in this range. So that's May 31st, June 6th, May 31st, 3 years in a row. The next time ESPN releases a mock, trust it. Trust it. It's going to be damn close. And if history repeats itself, it's going to be straight up spot on. In 2025, the Blazers post-lottery was Derek Queen. That was their pick for ESPN. And now post-combine, it's Yegor Demon from BYU. Is Yegor the guy? Is that the guy? Or do we know? Or will this following mock, say it's a week or 10 days out, will that be the one that kind of finalizes it? It usually doesn't stretch much longer. This is not a team that they've had trouble and, we finally got it on, draft night. This has been strong prognostication, pretty much spot on, right in the range that you are sitting in now. The next ESPN mock draft, I bet, will be pretty darn predictive, and certainly I will cover it here on the show. What I want to do to close the show is talk about lessons from the conference finals. I think every team that is left, there are 4 teams remaining. Each of them took a different route to get there, and they went from not very good 3 to 4 years ago to in the freaking conference finals, from bad to good in a relative hurry. Wouldn't you, dear Blazer fan, hope that your beloved squad goes from bad to good in a relative hurry? Well, join me in the third segment. We'll talk about how these teams did it and how maybe not necessarily Blazers can follow that path, but how they all follow different paths as sort of proof that there are many, many, many ways to dress a salad, particularly in the age of parity in the NBA. Join me in that third segment, won't you? First, though, let's talk about underwear. Listen, the most important thing that underwear can be is comfortable and not noticeable. What you want to do is you want to put it on and say, wow, this is so comfortable. And then you want to not think about it for the remainder of your day. And that's what Skims is doing. They have famously made more feminine undergarment products, but now they're making undergarments for everybody. So whatever your cut, whatever style you're into for your underwear, you're going to find it on Skims, and then you're going to be super duper comfortable wearing it. Skims was nice enough to send me a couple pairs of underwear, and let me tell you, they're great. I put them on. I'm like, wow, these are very comfortable undergarments. And then I go about my day, because the worst thing that can happen to you during your day is having to consider what your undergarments are doing. That part stinks. That's not a good part of your day. So Skims takes that out of your day and allows you to be comfortable, whether you're working out or just living your life, running errands, parenting, having fun, living your life. You got reliable, comfortable underwear. Plus, you're gonna feel sleek, and you won't have to think about it. So shop Skims Mens at skims.com/LockedOnNBA and Skims stores, and let them know we sent you. After you place your order, select podcast in the survey and select our show in the drop-down menu that follows. Skims is the official underwear partner of the NBA, WNBA, and USA Basketball. All right, still a pass first point guard. Still Mike Richmond, still listening to Locked On Blazers. Let's talk about lessons from the conference finalists. Look, there are a lot of ways to get good. There are two things that I think are the sort of through lines for the teams that are remaining in the NBA playoffs. One, they're healthy. That's always it. I think like one of the hardest things for sports fans to accept is that luck is incredibly important in your pursuit of the ultimate goal. You got to get lucky. You got to get lucky. You're probably going to get lucky several times, but luck is part of it. You got to stay healthy, and the other, good luck for you, bad luck for them. That's how you get there. I think the theme is like the Pacers were healthier than the Cavs. They beat them down, but they were healthier. The Knicks were healthier than the Celtics overall. Beat them down, but they were healthier. The Wolves, health was certainly part of it. I don't want to dismiss that as the only thing, but certainly part of it. Like, Steph Curry was hurt. It happens. And OKC ran, they played 7 games, but at the end of those 7 games, Michael Porter Jr. is playing with one arm, and Aaron Gordon has a grade 2 hamstring, and he gutted it out or whatever, but OKC was healthier. It's how it works. Through line, good luck. Okay. All the other through line is you have a great player. All these dudes, every one of these teams is probably going to have an All-NBA guy this year. Halliburton may or may not make an All-NBA team, but I think he'll be right there. If not, the Pacers have 2 All-Stars, right? It's like Siakam and Holiday or Siakam and Halliburton are really good. But I think Brunson will make All-NBA. I think Ant will make All-NBA, and SGA is going to win MVP, right? Like it's high-end talent. But the path to get there is a little bit different for each team. Let's start with the Pacers. What they did was they traded for all-stars. In the 21-22 season, the Pacers were bad. They finished 25-57. They're bad. And at the trade deadline that year, they shipped out Domantas Sabonis for promising youngster, and at the time, maybe the Kings' best player in terms of some indicators on his future, Tyrese Halliburton. The following year, they weren't particularly good in 22-23, but Halliburton made an all-star team and averaged 20 and 10. The next season, that would be the all-star, heading into it was before the trade deadline. It was like January of 2023. They were 24 and 17 at the time. They're good. They turned it around. They were having their best season after 2 years in the pits. They traded for Pascal Siakam. They made the Eastern Conference Finals. This year they started slow, 16-18, I believe. They won 50 games this year, and they're back in the Eastern Conference Finals. They traded for 2 All-Stars. One of the tricks that they followed and that OKC followed, and shout out to Tom Ziller for pointing this out this morning in his Good Morning It's Basketball newsletter, a newsletter I subscribe to and really love. The trick is have Paul George. Trade Paul George. It worked for the Thunder. It worked for the Pacers. They traded Paul George, got Domantas Sabonis. They traded Domantas Sabonis, got Tyrese Halliburton. The trick, have Paul George. If you trade Paul George, you make the conference finals. But the Pacers did it by, they nailed some picks around the margins, right? Like it's like, Nemhard and the trade for Aaron Nesmith. It's like they've nailed some stuff around the margins, but they traded for all-stars. Those were the moves they made. They made trades to acquire all-star level talent. On the other side is the Knicks. What they did was they signed an all-star. They went to free agency. Trading wasn't their path. It was free agency. They signed Jalen Brunson in the summer of 2022, coming off a 37-45 season. They're bad. And 37-45 in the East is stinky, right? That's just bad. The following year, they won 47 games in 22-23. They won 47 games, and Brunson got freaking MVP votes. They won a playoff series. The next season, they say, okay, we're gonna make a move. They traded for OG Anunoby, heading into that trade deadline, right? It was early. I believe it was in December of that year, but they traded for OG Anunoby. Pretty good, but not like the next level. This year, they said, okay, Jalen Brunson is an MVP caliber type of guy. We are a win a bunch of games type of team. We've traded for OG Anunoby. It's time to go even further. They trade for Karl Anthony Towns. They cash in a cajillion picks to trade for Mikal Bridges. They win 51 games. They're in the Eastern Conference Finals. They signed an underrated star, and then once they realized that he was that good, they went all in to back him. And they basically said, we're going to trade all we've got to make the best roster we possibly can, and we're going to do it in 2 years. As soon as the proof of concept Brunson worked in the 22-23 season, the following 2 years, they basically have an entirely new roster because they went for it hardcore. OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, and Karl Anthony Towns are the core of that talent alongside Brunson. The Wolves went maybe a more traditional route. They drafted the number 1 overall and landed a franchise star. This is maybe not super traditional. I think the real skeptics out there will point out that players drafted number 1 overall basically never win the championship with the team that drafted them. I believe since 1997, it's 2 guys. It's Tim Duncan and Kyrie Irving, and it could be 3 if you want to count LeBron James. But LeBron stayed for however long, a decade, went to Miami and came back. Certainly, he did win the championship with the team that drafted him, but after a long road. In terms of not switching up, Tim Duncan and Kyrie Irving over the last 30 years. It has been a while. But the Wolves in 2020 drafted Ant. They drafted Anthony Edwards. And they weren't good. They went 23-49. But they fired their coach at the end of that year, Ryan Saunders. They hired Chris Finch. And the first full year of Chris Finch in 21-22, they made the playoffs. And then they said, okay, we're a good basketball team with Karl Anthony Towns. We're a good basketball team with Ant Edwards. I'm calling him Anthony Edwards because I'm really good for messing up my ants. With Ant Edwards, like, we're good. Let's go all in. And they were maybe pressured by a new ownership group that was going to come in some years later, but was on the way in. They trade for Rudy Gobert. And they also traded for Mike Conley at the deadline as well, at that same deadline. It was a clunky fit. Karl Anthony Towns got injured. They never really gelled. They won 42 games. They weren't very good. But then the following year, 23-24, Jaden McDaniels emerges, right? He was in the same draft as Ant in 2020, but he emerges as like, oh, this is one of the best young defenders in the league. Naz Reid, who's actually their longest tenured player, he started in 2019 as undrafted. He emerged as a 6th man of the year and one of the best bench players in the league. The Cat and Gobert thing started to work with the full season for the year. You get a full year of Conley. Ant ascends into being like, oh yeah, you're one of the 20 best players in the league, and they win 56 games and make the Western Conference Finals. Bang. Hello. This year, they're a 49-win team. They're a little bit worse. For sure, they're a little bit worse because they did trade Karl Anthony Towns. You get Julius Randle. You get Dante DiVincenzo. But, Julius Randle has been hooping in the playoffs, and Dante is an awesome role player that makes it work. Nickeil Alexander-Walker over the last 2 years has emerged. But this was a team that built an elite defense around a really good ascending player who they drafted number 1 overall. Pacers traded for all-stars. The Knicks signed an underrated star and then built around, and the Wolves built around a top pick. So what did OKC do? They pulled off a totally unrepeatable trade, right? An unrepeatable trade. They trade for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in July of 2019. They spent a year actually being kind of good. They had Chris Paul and Dennis Schroeder and Danilo Gallinari, and they were good. They made the playoffs. It was a pretty good team. But then the following year, they kind of said, okay, we don't want to do that, right? We want to be bad. So they spent 2 years being awful. In 2021, and then 21-22, back-to-back seasons. In the summer of 2021, in that draft, they drafted Josh Giddey 6 overall. And he, other than Chet Holmgren, he's their only high lottery pick. Those are the only 2 top 6 picks to kind of fuel this rebuild. In the 23 draft, though, they nail it, right? That's the thing that, the 22 draft, they nail it. That's the thing that has changed their outcome. They draft J-Dub. They draft Jalen Williams at 12. He finished second in the Rookie of the Year race. He's an all-star that year. And they drafted Chet, who sat out the year 2nd overall. But that season, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is an all-NBA player. He gets MVP votes, and they, like, all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, they're good. They were 40 and 42. They made the play-in, and so they said, okay, after 2 years in the 2 years in the hole, we're on the way up, and Chet's going to be ready the following year. Chet is ready. He finishes second in Rookie of the Year, and last season they win 57 games. They end up losing the second round of the tournament of the playoffs, and they kind of reassess, right? And so this summer they sign Isaiah Hartenstein, and Hartenstein is the largest free agent signing in Oklahoma City history. They trade for Alex Caruso. You could argue that Caruso and Hartenstein have been the Thunder's second and third best players during this playoff run. And so really what the theme for the Thunder is like, you can't repeat the Shai trade. You're not going to trade for 5 first-round picks and an MVP. Like, it's just hard to make that happen. But you can nail a trade and then do what they did on the other side. They just got everything right in the margins. Aaron Wiggins is a second-rounder from 2021 draft. Isaiah Joe is a second-rounder from the 2020 draft. Lou Dort was undrafted two-way guy in 2019. Cason Wallace was the 10th pick, and he's like a really high-level contributor from the 2023 draft. Like, they didn't draft him particularly high, and he's really useful. They nailed the margins with a couple second-rounders, a two-way guy. Caruso is a great pickup. Hartenstein's a great pickup. And then they're built on the backs of lottery picks. SGA, a late lottery pick, but a big one, and J-Dub, a late lottery pick, but one they absolutely nailed. And Chet Holmgren, who's I thought he would be better in the playoffs than he has been, but huge as the second overall pick. They nailed the margins to make their team as deep and as good as it's been. You can't repeat some of the stuff they've did, but if you're going to get there, the way that you sustain being as good as they've been is getting the little stuff right once you get the big thing right. So that's 4 different ways: trading for all-stars, signing a free agent and then building around that, drafting number 1 overall, or then nailing the margins once you pull off the big trade to build out your depth. And for the most part, like, Josh Giddey not even on the team, they drafted 6. For the most part, OKC's, even their tanking run has, their war chest is filled with 1 million draft picks, but it's not built on high-level picks. It's not built on like high-end picks, like it's all top 5 selections. It's built on nailing all the stuff around a player that emerged from the lottery, and J-Dub, who's obviously a really good pick late in the lottery too. You got to nail draft picks at some points, but it's nailing those things as opposed to like continuously picking second overall. Can you do all that? I don't know. But can you do the OKC model? I don't know. Maybe not. Can you do the Wolves model? I don't know. Maybe not. Can you do the Knicks model? I don't know. Maybe not. Can you do the Pacers model? I don't know. Maybe not. But it is proof that there's 4 different ways to go from bad. The Pacers had a losing record in the 2022-23 season. The Knicks had a losing record in the 21-22 season. The Wolves were a bad basketball team. They had 23 wins in the 2020-2021 season. 4 years ago, they were awful. OKC's last losing season was 21-22. We're talking 3 to 4 years ago, all of these teams, and even more recently for the Pacers, 2 to 4 years ago, all of these teams had losing records, were bad basketball teams, and now they're in the Eastern Conference Finals. Build the way you can build. Follow your path. There are at least 4 different models to follow there, depending on sort of what your current situation provides you. And then get lucky. That's the path to win. These teams, Indiana and Minnesota and Oklahoma City, are proof that you don't need to be from a big market. And the Knicks have not been good at all over the last 30 years. They haven't made the NBA Finals since 1999. They were good in the 90s. In this century, they have not been a particularly good basketball team, regardless of market size. It is not that type of thing. You can get there, and there are different ways to do it. And all the conference finalists are proof of that exact truth, that there are different paths to do it. The Blazers, at some point, will have to pick their path. You got to get your star, and once you do it, you have to continue to follow the path that sort of your situation allows you to follow. That is going to do it for today's show. Come back for tomorrow's show. We'll talk Jeremy Grant, unless some news breaks, and we'll talk about that. But tomorrow's show is almost certainly going to be a season review for Jeremy Grant as we wrap up the big names in the Blazers roster and talk through what they did last season and look ahead to what's next for them. Come back for that show 5 days a week, wherever you get podcasts, and also on YouTube. Tell your friends about the program. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.